Just after noon on July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a startling press release, claiming to have recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Corona, New Mexico. The announcement sent shockwaves through the nation, igniting imaginations and fears alike. But within hours, the Army retracted the statement, declaring the object was merely a weather balloon. The abrupt reversal raised eyebrows and questions. What prompted such a swift change? Who was involved in the decision-making process, and what were they trying to protect? Key players emerged from this unfolding drama. Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who first handled the debris, Walter Haut, the public information officer who issued the initial press release, and General Roger Ramey, whose swift intervention led to the retraction. Each holds a piece of the puzzle, their roles interwoven in a narrative thick with secrecy and institutional self-preservation. As witnesses began to speak, the story fractured further. Some claimed to have seen alien bodies, while others remained steadfast in their belief that the military was merely covering up a mundane balloon. The uncertainty grew, as did the stakes. Credibility was on the line, and the implications reached far beyond a single incident in the desert. The central question remains: why did the Army Air Forces announce a flying disc and then reverse itself within hours? What changed, and who needed the story changed? This episode is sponsored by Opa Nutrition, makers of premium wellness supplements for focus, clarity, energy, resilience, and long-term health. Visit opanutrition.com for more information. Subscribe to stay informed, comment on where you're listening from, and share what you believe happened in Roswell. On July 8, 1947, a mysterious object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. Mac Brazel, a local rancher, stumbled upon a field of debris scattered across his property. The wreckage, described as unlike anything he had ever seen, sparked immediate intrigue. Initial reports from the Roswell Army Airfield suggested the object was a flying disc, igniting public curiosity and speculation. The Army Air Forces quickly issued a press release confirming the recovery of a flying disc. This announcement, made just hours after the crash, sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. It was a moment that seemed to promise answers to long-held questions about unidentified flying objects. But as quickly as the excitement built, the narrative shifted dramatically. Within hours, the Army retracted its statement, declaring the debris to be nothing more than a weather balloon. This abrupt reversal raised immediate questions about the integrity of the Army's initial claim. Why would the military, known for its strict protocols and communication, issue a statement only to retract it so swiftly? The implications were significant. The public's fascination turned to skepticism, and the military's credibility hung in the balance. Witnesses began to emerge, recounting their experiences and observations. Some claimed to have seen unusual materials, metallic fragments that did not resemble any known aircraft. These accounts contradicted the weather balloon explanation, creating a growing rift between the official narrative and the public perception. The stakes escalated as the military's credibility was put on the line. As the dust settled, the official story became increasingly tenuous. The change in narrative from a flying disc to a weather balloon did not just confuse the public, it ignited a firestorm of speculation and conspiracy. What had really crashed in the New Mexico desert, and who was pulling the strings behind the scenes? The very act of changing the story suggested a deeper, unsettling truth, one that would haunt the military and the citizens of Roswell for decades to come. In the days and weeks that followed, the question loomed large. What had the Army Air Forces discovered, and why did they feel the need to alter the narrative so drastically? The answers remained elusive, buried beneath layers of institutional secrecy and public intrigue. The military's swift denial raised suspicions about what they were hiding. On July 8, 1947, just a day after the initial announcement, General Roger Ramey, the commanding officer of the 8th Air Force, held a press conference at Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas. There he dismissed the flying disc claims with a wave of his hand and a carefully orchestrated display of photographs. Before a crowd of reporters, Ramey presented what he claimed was the true nature of the debris recovered near Roswell, a weather balloon. The photographs showed a tattered balloon and its accompanying instruments, surrounded by a few bemused military personnel. Ramey's demeanor was confident, almost dismissive. He stated unequivocally that the debris was part of a top-secret project, Project Mogul, intended to detect Soviet nuclear tests through high-altitude balloons. The implication was clear. the story of a flying disc was nothing more than a misinterpretation of a mundane object. Yet, this narrative did not sit well with many who had witnessed the original recovery. Local residents began to question the authenticity of the military's explanation. They had seen the debris themselves, strange materials that did not resemble any weather balloon they knew. Mac Brazel, the rancher who first discovered the wreckage, had described it as something unlike anything he had ever encountered. His initial statements, now overshadowed by Ramey's press conference, were filled with descriptions of metallic fragments that bent but did not break, and strange symbols that seemed to defy explanation. The stakes for the military were high. The Cold War was just beginning to cast its shadow over American society, and any hint of vulnerability or failure could have dire consequences. The swift denial of the flying disc narrative was not merely a matter of public relations. It was an attempt to maintain control over a narrative that threatened to spiral out of their grasp. Ramey's press conference was a calculated move to quell rising public curiosity and skepticism, but it only fueled the fire of conspiracy theories that began to take root in the minds of the American public. As the days turned into weeks, the official narrative became a point of contention among the public and the press. Skeptics emerged, questioning the military's motives and the veracity of their claims. Why would the Army Air Forces go to such lengths to cover up a simple weather balloon? The very act of changing the story suggested a deeper, unsettling truth, one that would haunt the military and the citizens of Roswell for decades to come. Witnesses reported seeing military personnel collecting debris from the site, often under the cover of darkness. The presence of armed guards and the hurried removal of materials only added to the sense that something significant was being concealed. The culture of distrust towards government explanations began to take shape, as more people began to speak out about their own experiences and encounters with the debris. As the summer wore on, the Roswell Incident became a focal point for UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. The military's denial, rather than dispelling rumors, had inadvertently sparked a long-standing debate about the existence of extraterrestrial life. The question of what had truly happened in Roswell loomed larger than ever, as conspiracy theories proliferated and gained traction in popular culture. The reversal of the military's narrative marked a pivotal moment in the history of UFO discourse. It shifted the conversation from a singular event to a broader inquiry into government transparency and accountability. The implications were profound. If the military could mislead the public about something as seemingly innocuous as a weather balloon, what else were they hiding? As the years passed, the Roswell Incident would evolve from a local mystery into a national obsession. The very act of denial had created a vacuum, drawing in a myriad of theories and claims, some grounded in fact, others steeped in speculation. The official narrative, once a straightforward explanation, became entangled in a web of intrigue and distrust. In the aftermath, the military's response would set a precedent for how similar incidents were handled in the future. The creation of a culture of secrecy around UFOs would influence not only military policy, but also public perception. The denial of the flying disc narrative left a lingering question: what, if anything, lay behind the veil of official explanations? As the debate raged on, new documents began to surface, some declassified, others leaked, hinting at a more complex reality than the military was willing to acknowledge. The Roswell Incident had opened a door that many wished would remain closed, and the consequences of that moment would ripple through history, shaping the very fabric of American skepticism toward its government. What lay ahead was a series of revelations that would challenge the very foundations of the official story. New witnesses would emerge, and the search for truth would take unexpected turns. The question remained, in a world where the extraordinary was routinely dismissed, what truths were left to uncover? What lay ahead was a series of revelations that would challenge the very foundations of the official story. New witnesses would emerge, and the search for truth would take unexpected turns. The question remained, in a world where the extraordinary was routinely dismissed, what truths were left to uncover? On July 8, 1947, just one day after the initial announcement, the first eyewitness accounts began to surface. Local residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky the night before. These accounts varied widely, with descriptions ranging from bright pulsating orbs to elongated shapes darting across the horizon. One resident, a farmer named William Bill McDonald, recounted how he and his family had stepped outside that evening, drawn by the unusual lights. It was like nothing I had ever seen, he recalled. It moved too fast to be a plane, and it was silent, just gone. McDonald's testimony was not isolated. Others in the area, including ranchers and townsfolk, began to share their experiences. A group of teenagers reported seeing a flying object that glowed intensely before disappearing behind the mountains. The sheer number of these accounts began to paint a picture that diverged sharply from the Army's narrative. But it was Mac Brazel's testimony that would further complicate the situation. Brazel, who had discovered the debris on his ranch, initially described it as a flying disc. In interviews, he expressed confusion over the military's insistence that the wreckage was merely a weather balloon. "I know what I saw," he said. "This was unlike anything I had encountered before." His insistence contradicted the Army's official line, raising questions about the integrity of their explanation. The stakes were escalating. As the military attempted to control the narrative, the local community began to fracture. Reports emerged of military trucks and personnel flooding the area, leading to speculation about what the Army was really doing. Witnesses recounted seeing soldiers cordoning off sections of the ranch, some claiming they were ordered to keep quiet about what they had seen. The presence of military personnel was unsettling. It suggested that there was something more significant at play than a simple weather balloon. As more locals came forward with their own accounts, the narrative surrounding the Roswell incident grew increasingly complex. Some claimed to have seen alien bodies, describing them as small, with large heads and eyes. These accounts, while disputed, added a layer of intrigue that fueled public fascination. The military's silence regarding these claims only intensified speculation. Why were they not addressing these testimonies? What were they hiding? The uncertainty surrounding the truth began to fracture community trust. The more convoluted the story became, the initial clarity of the Army's announcement was muddied by conflicting accounts and the growing number of individuals who felt compelled to share their experiences. Each new testimony seemed to pull the thread of the official narrative further apart. Then, in a surprising turn, a former military officer, Captain Edward R. Smith, came forward years later to assert that he had witnessed the aftermath of the crash. He claimed to have seen the bodies that others had described, asserting that they were indeed not of this world. His statement, while not corroborated by any official records, reignited debates about the incident. The implications of his claims were staggering. If true, they would fundamentally alter the understanding of what had occurred in Roswell. The military's response to these emerging accounts was one of silence, which only fueled further speculation. As the years passed, some witnesses began to question their own memories, while others remained steadfast in their beliefs. The patchwork of testimonies created a narrative that was difficult to decipher. The official story, once seemingly straightforward, was now a labyrinth of conflicting accounts and unverified claims. The tension between the military's narrative and the testimonies of local witnesses created a rift that would last for decades. Trust in the Army was eroded, and the community found itself caught in a web of uncertainty. The more the military attempted to dismiss the claims, the more fervently some residents held on to their beliefs. The question of what had truly happened in Roswell became a matter of personal conviction for many. As the years rolled on, the emergence of these accounts complicated the official story. The Army had attempted to close the book on the incident, but the whispers of witnesses persisted. The narrative had shifted from a simple explanation of a weather balloon to a tapestry of experiences that included sightings of strange lights, military secrecy, and even claims of extraterrestrial beings. The implications of these accounts were profound. They suggested that the truth was far more elusive than anyone had anticipated. The question remained, why did the Army Air Forces announce a flying disc and then reverse itself within hours? What changed, and who needed the story changed? As the investigation deepened, the layers of complexity continued to unfold. The community of Roswell was left grappling with its own reality, one where the extraordinary could no longer be easily dismissed. Each witness who stepped forward added to the growing body of evidence, but also to the uncertainty. In the shadows of this evolving narrative, a new voice emerged, a local journalist who had been following the story closely and began to uncover documents that hinted at a deeper military involvement. What would these documents reveal about the government's actions in Roswell? Would they finally shed light on the mystery that had captivated so many for decades? In the shadows of this evolving narrative, a new voice emerged, a local journalist who had been following the story closely and began to uncover documents that hinted at a deeper military involvement. The name was Frank Joyce, a reporter for the Roswell Daily Record, who, driven by curiosity, and a sense of duty, began to sift through the chaos that surrounded the initial reports. Joyce's inquiries coincided with a surge of national media interest. Major outlets, including the Associated Press and United Press International, picked up the story, amplifying the public's fascination with the bizarre claims of a flying disc. Headlines screamed of a government cover-up, igniting a media frenzy that reached far beyond the dusty plains of New Mexico. The initial report by the Army Air Forces, which had briefly instigated hope for transparency, quickly morphed into a spectacle of sensationalism. As journalists from coast to coast began to scrutinize the military's conflicting statements, the narrative took on a life of its own. The Army's quick retraction of the flying disc claim, replaced by a vague assertion of a weather balloon, became a focal point for investigative reporters. They questioned why such a drastic change had occurred within mere hours. The stakes for the military rose sharply. They were no longer just managing a local incident, but were now facing a national outcry for clarity. The human stakes were equally profound. The public, already captivated by the prospect of extraterrestrial life, began to speculate wildly. The Roswell Incident became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of possible government deception. As journalists dug deeper, they uncovered not only inconsistencies in the military's statements, but also a growing body of witness accounts that contradicted the official narrative. The more the military attempted to control the story, the more their credibility eroded, leading to increased scrutiny. In this tumultuous environment, the media's portrayal of the incident began to shape public perception in ways that the military could not have anticipated. The frenzy created a feedback loop of misinformation and speculation. Each new article, each new broadcast, added layers to the story, blurring the lines between fact and fiction. The initial reports of a crash and recovery of alien technology morphed into theories of government conspiracies and cover-ups, feeding the public's hunger for the extraordinary. As the media landscape shifted, the military found itself in a precarious position. They struggled to maintain control over a narrative that was rapidly slipping through their fingers. The initial announcement had been a bold assertion, but the subsequent retraction raised questions that could not be easily dismissed. Why had they acted so decisively, only to backtrack so quickly? What lay beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward incident? Amidst this chaos, Joyce uncovered a series of documents that hinted at a more extensive military operation in the area. These papers suggested that the Roswell incident was not an isolated event, but part of a broader pattern of military secrecy regarding unidentified aerial phenomena. As he pieced together the timeline, the implications grew more alarming. Could it be that the military was not merely reacting to a local incident, but was instead engaged in a calculated effort to mislead the public? The growing tension between the military's need for secrecy and the media's relentless pursuit of the truth only intensified the scrutiny. Investigative reporters, emboldened by the public's fascination with the unknown, began to connect the dots between the Roswell incident and other unexplained occurrences. The stakes were rising, not just for the military's reputation, but for the very fabric of trust between the government and its citizens. The reversal of the narrative from a flying disc to a weather balloon was no mere miscommunication. It was a pivot that exposed the fragility of the military's credibility. Each conflicting statement only served to deepen the public's suspicion. What had begun as a local story of an unusual crash had morphed into a national debate about truth, transparency, and the unknown. As the media frenzy reached its zenith, the question loomed larger: what was the military hiding? The public's appetite for answers grew insatiable, and with it the pressure on the military to provide clarity. Yet with every attempt to clarify, the military's credibility continued to erode. The narrative was no longer just about Roswell. It had become a symbol of an ongoing struggle between authority and inquiry. As Frank Joyce delved deeper into the documents, he began to uncover not only military reports, but also correspondence that hinted at a concerted effort to manage public perception. The implications were staggering. Could it be that the Roswell incident was merely the tip of the iceberg, a small piece of a larger puzzle that the government was desperate to keep hidden? The revelations continued to unfold, and with them, the stakes grew ever higher. The military's narrative was unraveling, and the public's trust was hanging by a thread. Would the truth about Roswell ever see the light of day, or would it remain buried beneath layers of misinformation and institutional secrecy? The answers seemed tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly out of reach. As the story continued to evolve, leaving behind a trail of questions that demanded resolution. The revelations continued to unfold, and with them the stakes grew ever higher. The military's narrative was unraveling, and the public's trust was hanging by a thread. By the end of July 1947, whispers of a cover-up began to circulate, igniting a firestorm of speculation that would engulf not just Roswell, but the entire nation. In the weeks following the initial announcement, conspiracy theories about a government cover-up began to proliferate. The notion that the military was concealing evidence of extraterrestrial life took root in the minds of many. Among the most vocal proponents of this theory was a man named Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist and one of the first civilian investigators of the Roswell Incident. Friedman asserted that the military's swift retraction of the flying disc statement was not merely a mistake, but a calculated move to suppress the truth. His claims, bolstered by a growing body of anecdotal evidence and testimonies from alleged witnesses, began to gain traction. The implications of these theories were profound. As the public began to question the integrity of the military, the stakes for the government increased exponentially. The Army's credibility was on the line, and with it the trust of the American people. The idea that the military was hiding information about extraterrestrial encounters became a narrative that resonated deeply within a society already grappling with the uncertainties of the post-war world. But as the cover-up narrative gained momentum, it also complicated the official story. Key figures in the military, including General Roger Ramey, who had publicly dismissed the flying disc claims, began to deny any knowledge of alien technology. Ramey's insistence that the debris recovered was nothing more than a weather balloon did little to quell the growing skepticism. Instead, it further fueled speculation. Why would a high-ranking official risk his reputation to deny something that seemed innocuous? The contradictions in the military's messaging only deepened the public's distrust. As the theories became more elaborate, they often lacked solid evidence. Some suggested that the government had recovered not just debris, but living extraterrestrials, while others posited that a secret military base was housing advanced alien technology. The uncertainty surrounding the truth fueled further investigation, drawing in amateur sleuths and professional researchers alike. Books, articles, and documentaries began to emerge, each adding layers to the already complex narrative. The cover-up narrative transformed into a cultural phenomenon, permeating popular media and public discourse. It became a lens through which many began to view not just Roswell, but the government itself. The idea that the truth was being hidden became a rallying cry for those disillusioned by the institutions meant to protect them. The military's evasive response to these theories only served to reinforce the belief that something monumental was being concealed. As the years passed, the Roswell incident morphed into a symbol of governmental secrecy and the potential existence of extraterrestrial life. The original facts of the case became obscured by layers of speculation and myth. The central question, why did the Army Air Forces announce a flying disc and then reverse itself, remained unanswered, driving further inquiry into the incident. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, and with it, the implications for the military and the government grew more serious. Each new claim, each new witness, added to the complexity of the situation. In the shadows of the cover-up theories, a deeper truth lurked, waiting to be uncovered. As the public's fascination with Roswell persisted, one crucial element remained: the voices of those who claimed to have seen or experienced something extraordinary. Among them was Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who had first examined the debris. In interviews decades later, Marcel expressed regret over the military's handling of the incident, suggesting that the truth had been obscured by fear and misinformation. His reflections raised a haunting question. If the military was indeed hiding something, what else might they be concealing from the public? The layers of secrecy continued to build, and with each revelation, the stakes became more pronounced. The military's commitment to maintaining control over the narrative was clear, yet the public's demand for transparency grew louder. The tension between these two forces set the stage for an ongoing battle over the truth, one that would reverberate for decades to come. As the investigation into the Roswell incident unfolded, the question lingered: what was the government truly afraid of? The answer remained elusive, buried beneath a mountain of speculation and a culture of secrecy that had taken root in the aftermath of the war. The more the story evolved, the more complex the truth became, leading to a chilling realization: The very act of denial could be more revealing than the truth itself. In the quiet corners of America, where the whispers of conspiracy thrived, the search for answers continued. And as the shadows lengthened, the question remained, what would it take to finally unveil the truth behind Roswell? In the quiet corners of America, where the whispers of conspiracy thrived, the search for answers continued. And as the shadows lengthened, the question remained, what would it take to finally unveil the truth behind Roswell? In the years following the incident, public interest in unidentified flying objects surged. The Roswell Incident became a cornerstone of UFO lore, a reference point for countless theories and speculations. The initial excitement, however, was met with a wall of silence. The military's abrupt retraction of the flying disc announcement left many questioning the integrity of the information provided by the Army Air Forces. As the decades passed, the U.S. government began declassifying documents related to the incident, yet many remained heavily redacted, fueling further speculation. Historians scrutinized the military's handling of the event, revealing a pattern of obfuscation that seemed to grow with each new piece of evidence. The legacy of Roswell was not merely one of a single event, but rather a reflection of how the military managed crises in the public eye. The stakes for the military evolved as they faced ongoing scrutiny from an increasingly curious public. Investigative groups dedicated to UFO research sprang up, driven by a desire to uncover the truth behind government secrecy. These organizations, often comprised of former military personnel and civilians alike, sought to challenge the official narrative. They pored over documents, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a mosaic of accounts that painted a picture of uncertainty and fear. As interest in UFOs grew, so too did the cultural implications of Roswell. The incident seeped into the fabric of popular culture, influencing films, literature, and even political discourse. The uncertainty surrounding the event persisted, becoming a touchstone for debates about government transparency and accountability. The military's response to UFO sightings began to shift in light of the Roswell incident. Each new sighting was met with a mix of skepticism and concern, as officials grappled with the implications of public fascination with the unknown. The legacy of Roswell shaped future government responses, creating a framework for how such incidents would be managed, often with a heavy emphasis on denial and disinformation. Yet, as the narrative surrounding Roswell solidified, it also revealed cracks. Witnesses like Jesse Marcel, who had initially shared their accounts of strange debris, began to feel the weight of their experiences. Some recounted how they were pressured to recant or alter their stories, raising questions about the integrity of their testimonies. The military's insistence on a weather balloon explanation seemed increasingly tenuous in light of these conflicting narratives. What emerged was a complex interplay of truth and deception, where the official story diverged sharply from the lived experiences of those involved. The reversal of the Army's initial claim forced a reconsideration of the motivations behind such a drastic change. Why would the military abandon a narrative that could have captured the public's imagination? What did they fear might unfold if the truth were revealed? The incident remained a pivotal moment in the history of UFO phenomena, a flashpoint that ignited a fervent quest for answers that persists to this day. The implications of Roswell extended beyond mere curiosity. They touched on fundamental questions of trust between the government and its citizens. As the decades rolled on, the Roswell incident continued to haunt the corridors of power. Each new revelation, each declassified document, only added layers to the mystery. The question remained, what truly happened in the New Mexico desert, and why did the Army Air Forces feel the need to reshape the narrative so quickly? With each passing year, the stakes grew higher. The revelations of the past echoed into the present, as the military's credibility faced ongoing challenges. New witnesses emerged, some claiming to have been involved in the cover-up, while others recounted experiences that contradicted the official line. In the midst of this swirling uncertainty, a new document surfaced, one that promised to shed light on the military's actions. It contained accounts from personnel stationed at Roswell Army Airfield in the days following the incident, accounts that diverged sharply from the established narrative. What secrets lay within its pages, and would they finally provide the clarity that had eluded so many for decades? In the midst of this swirling uncertainty, a new document surfaced, one that promised to shed light on the military's actions. It contained accounts from personnel stationed at Roswell Army Airfield in the days following the incident. accounts that diverged sharply from the established narrative. What secrets lay within its pages? And would they finally provide the clarity that had eluded so many for decades? By the early 1970s, the Roswell Incident was no longer a mere footnote in the annals of American history. It had transformed into a cultural phenomenon, fueled by a growing public fascination with unidentified flying objects. Books began to emerge, such as Charles Berlitz's and William Moore's The Roswell Incident, published in 1980. The authors meticulously pieced together testimonies from various witnesses, igniting a resurgence of interest that would reverberate through the years. Among the witnesses was Jesse Marcel, who had been the intelligence officer at Roswell Army Airfield. In interviews conducted during this resurgence, Marcel recounted his experiences with a fervor that suggested a lingering trauma. He claimed that the debris he had recovered was not of this earth. His assertions, once dismissed, were now being revisited with a sense of urgency. The stakes for the government were rising. The narrative they had constructed was beginning to unravel. The military's previous denials were now under scrutiny as more individuals came forward, each adding layers of complexity to the story. Some claimed to have seen alien bodies, while others recounted strange lights in the sky. The official narrative, which had once been a straightforward dismissal of the incident, was now being challenged by a chorus of voices. This shift in public perception marked a significant reversal. The idea that the military could simply dismiss the incident as a weather balloon was losing its grip. The very notion of government transparency was being called into question, as citizens began to demand answers. What had once been a tightly controlled story was now a tapestry of conflicting accounts, each thread pulling at the seams of the official narrative. As the 1970s progressed, the Roswell Incident became emblematic of a larger discourse surrounding government secrecy. It was no longer just about a crash in the New Mexico desert. It was about trust, accountability, and the very nature of truth in an era marked by skepticism. The implications were profound as the public began to connect the dots between other unexplained phenomena and the military's reticence. In this climate of renewed inquiry, the question loomed larger than ever. What had really happened at Roswell? Each new revelation seemed to suggest that the truth was not simply hidden, but actively obscured. The incident had evolved from a local curiosity into a national obsession, a symbol of the broader struggle between citizen and state. As the decade wore on, the momentum continued to build. Documentaries began to air, exploring the incident with a critical eye. One such film, UFOs Are Real, released in 1979, featured interviews with witnesses and experts, further complicating the narrative. The film's impact was palpable as it reached audiences who had previously been unaware or dismissive of the Roswell story. The military's response remained largely unchanged, yet the pressure was mounting. Each new piece of evidence brought forth by amateur investigators and researchers challenged the status quo. Government officials, once confident in their denials, were now faced with a populace demanding transparency. The stakes were escalating, and with them the urgency for a definitive answer. The Roswell Incident had become a cultural touchstone, a symbol of the unknown that captivated the imagination of a generation. As more witnesses emerged, the narrative surrounding the event continued to evolve. No longer could it be easily categorized as a simple case of mistaken identity or miscommunication. The complexity of the accounts suggested something deeper, something that challenged the very foundations of the official story. The question of what happened at Roswell was no longer confined to the dusty archives of military history. It had seeped into the public consciousness, igniting debates and discussions that would last for decades. The implications of the incident extended beyond the immediate circumstances. They touched on themes of trust, accountability, and the nature of reality itself. As the 1970s drew to a close, the Roswell Incident stood as a testament to the power of inquiry and the resilience of those who sought the truth. The evolving narrative was a reflection of a society grappling with its own uncertainties, a society that demanded answers in the face of ambiguity. In the shadows of this growing discourse, a chilling question emerged. If the government had concealed the truth about Roswell, what else were they hiding? The stakes were rising, and with them the urgency for answers. The incident had become a flashpoint, igniting a fire of curiosity that would not be easily extinguished. As new voices entered the conversation, the narrative surrounding Roswell continued to shift. Each account, each witness, added a new layer of complexity to the already intricate tapestry of events. The official story was no longer a monolith. It was a fractured reflection of a reality that was far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The question of why the Army Air Forces had initially announced a flying disc and then reversed itself within hours remained unanswered. What had changed in that brief span of time? Who needed the story altered, and why? The stakes were higher than ever, and the implications of the answers could reshape the very fabric of public trust in government institutions. As the decade turned, the Roswell Incident was poised to enter a new phase of scrutiny, one that would challenge the very narratives that had been constructed around it. The search for the truth was far from over, and the echoes of that fateful summer in 1947 continued to reverberate through the corridors of power and the hearts of those seeking answers. As the decade turned, the Roswell Incident was poised to enter a new phase of scrutiny, one that would challenge the very narratives that had been constructed around it. The search for the truth was far from over, and the echoes of that fateful summer in 1947 continued to reverberate through the corridors of power and the hearts of those seeking answers. In the early 1980s, the U.S. Air Force initiated a series of investigations into unidentified flying objects, a response to the growing public fascination and concern surrounding the phenomenon. These investigations, known as Project Blue Book, sought to address the myriad reports of UFO sightings across the country. Within this context, the Roswell Incident resurfaced, prompting officials to revisit the events of July 1947. The Air Force, now equipped with the benefit of decades of hindsight, aimed to reframe the narrative. The official reports suggested that the debris recovered near Roswell was not of extraterrestrial origin, but rather the remnants of a secret military project known as Project Mogul. This program involved high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests, a detail that, if true, would serve to explain the initial confusion surrounding the incident. The stakes for the military were high. Controlling the narrative surrounding Roswell was crucial to maintaining public trust and mitigating the potential fallout from the incident. Yet, the Air Force's attempts to quell speculation only seemed to deepen the mystery. The very acknowledgement of Project Mogul raised questions about the extent of government secrecy and the lengths to which officials would go to protect classified information. Skeptics, including UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists, found the explanations lacking. They pointed to inconsistencies in the timeline and the nature of the debris described by witnesses like Jesse Marcel, who had initially handled the materials. The Air Force's narrative became increasingly convoluted. As they sought to clarify the events of 1947, they inadvertently opened the door to further speculation. The reports acknowledged the public's fascination with UFOs, yet they failed to bridge the gap between official statements and the beliefs held by many Americans. The more the military tried to explain away the incident, the more entrenched conspiracy theories became. This created a reversal in understanding. What was once perceived as a straightforward military explanation now appeared to be an elaborate cover-up. The public's trust in the government's ability to provide transparent and truthful accounts of such incidents eroded, fueling a cycle of skepticism and inquiry. The Roswell Incident, rather than fading into obscurity, had become a cornerstone of UFO lore, a symbol of the broader struggle between authority and the quest for truth. As the investigations unfolded, one question loomed larger than ever. What was the true nature of the events in Roswell, and who stood to gain from the continued obfuscation? The answers seemed to slip further away, buried beneath layers of official reports and public speculation, leaving a lingering uncertainty that would haunt the narrative for decades to come. As the investigations unfolded, one question loomed larger than ever. What was the true nature of the events in Roswell, and who stood to gain from the continued obfuscation? The answers seemed to slip further away, buried beneath layers of official reports and public speculation, leaving a lingering uncertainty that would haunt the narrative for decades to come. In the years following the incident, Roswell transformed from a military outpost into a cultural touchstone, a symbol of the unknown. The initial reports of a flying disc ignited imaginations and sparked a burgeoning interest in extraterrestrial life. By the late 1970s, a wave of literature, documentaries, and films began to emerge, each adding new layers to the Roswell narrative. Books like The Roswell Incident by Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore popularized the idea that the government was not only aware of alien encounters, but actively concealing them. This was not merely a story of a crash, it was a narrative of secrecy, betrayal, and the quest for truth. The cultural impact of Roswell was profound. It shaped public perceptions of government secrecy and the military's role in managing information. The incident became a lens through which many viewed the government's relationship with its citizens, an institution that withheld information, perhaps even from its own personnel. The stakes for the military evolved as they navigated this new cultural narrative. They were no longer just dealing with a potential security breach. They were contending with a public increasingly skeptical of their motives and transparency. As UFO sightings surged, so did scrutiny of military operations. The public's fascination with the unknown led to demands for accountability, prompting military officials to reassess their communication strategies regarding unidentified aerial phenomena. Yet, the uncertainty surrounding Roswell became woven into the fabric of American folklore. It was a story that transcended fact and fiction, evolving into a mythos that resonated with the public's desire for answers. The phrase Roswell became synonymous with conspiracy theories, drawing in not just UFO enthusiasts, but also skeptics and curious minds alike. The legacy of the incident continued to provoke debate and speculation, influencing how future government responses to UFO sightings were crafted. The military learned to tread carefully, often opting for silence or vague reassurances, fearing that any admission could reignite the fervor surrounding Roswell. As the years passed, the Roswell incident's cultural significance only deepened. It inspired countless television shows, from The X-Files to Ancient Aliens, each exploring the intersection of government secrecy and extraterrestrial life. The narrative surrounding Roswell became a template for how society approached the unknown, an exploration of fear, wonder, and the quest for truth that resonated with audiences across generations. But the most striking aspect of Roswell's legacy is the way it reflects a broader societal anxiety about the unknown. The incident became a mirror, reflecting fears of technological advancement, government control, and the fragility of truth in an age of information overload. The question of what really happened in July 1947 became less about the specifics of the event and more about what it represented, a struggle between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen. As the cultural impact of Roswell continued to unfold, it became clear that the incident was not simply an isolated event, but a catalyst for a larger conversation about transparency, trust, and the nature of reality itself. The enduring fascination with the unknown pushed individuals to question the narratives presented to them, challenging the very fabric of accepted truths. Yet even as the story evolved, one question remained unanswered. Why did the Army Air Forces announce a flying disc, and then reverse itself within hours? What changed, and who needed the story changed? The answers lay buried in the shadows of official documents and the testimonies of those who dared to speak out. In the heart of this enigma lies a new revelation, a recently declassified document that hints at the military's internal deliberations following the initial announcement. What secrets does it hold, and how might it reshape our understanding of the Roswell incident? In the heart of this enigma lies a new revelation, a recently declassified document that hints at the military's internal deliberations following the initial announcement. Among the pages, a series of memos from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, dated July 1947, reveal a growing concern about public perception and the potential for mass panic. The military's immediate response to the Roswell incident was not merely a matter of clarification. It was a calculated move to control a narrative that was spiraling out of their grasp. As investigations into unidentified aerial phenomena gain momentum in the 21st century, the Roswell incident resurfaces, igniting a renewed interest in what transpired in the New Mexico desert. The U.S. government, under pressure from both the public and advocacy groups, has begun releasing previously classified documents related to UFOs. This influx of information, while often redacted, has fueled speculation and debate about the authenticity of the original claims made by the Army Air Forces. The stakes for the military have risen significantly as new evidence comes to light. The release of documents, including witness testimonies and internal communications, has prompted a re-examination of the incident itself. The public's curiosity about UFOs, once relegated to fringe discussions, has now entered the mainstream. with calls for transparency echoing through congressional hearings and media outlets alike. The Roswell Incident, once a singular event, has transformed into a case study for modern UFO investigations, a lens through which to view the broader implications of government secrecy. Witnesses continue to share their stories, complicating the narrative further. Individuals like Jesse Marcel, who initially handled the debris, have spoken out in the years since, asserting that what they encountered was not of this earth. Their accounts, often conflicting and laden with personal interpretations, have added layers of complexity to an already convoluted history. Each new statement from a witness can shift the understanding of the incident, revealing the fragility of memory and the power of perception. Yet as more voices emerge, the uncertainty surrounding the truth remains a point of contention. Some argue that the military's quick retraction of the flying disc narrative was not just a miscommunication, but a deliberate act to obscure the reality of what occurred. Others maintain that the initial excitement surrounding the incident was simply a misunderstanding of weather balloons and experimental technology. The divergence in these interpretations underscores the difficulty in establishing a singular truth in a landscape rife with speculation and skepticism. The legacy of Roswell continues to influence current discussions about national security. The incident has become emblematic of a broader distrust in government institutions, a symbol of the lengths to which authorities might go to protect their interests. As the military grapples with the implications of public interest in UFOs, the Roswell incident serves as a reminder of the potential consequences of secrecy. The narrative surrounding extraterrestrial life and government transparency is not merely an academic debate. It carries real stakes for national security, public trust, and the future of scientific inquiry. As interest in UFOs escalates, the Roswell incident remains a focal point in the ongoing debate about extraterrestrial life. The question of whether we are alone in the universe persists, and the implications of that question extend far beyond mere curiosity. The military's response to the Roswell incident and the subsequent evolution of the narrative has set a precedent for how such phenomena are addressed, or avoided, in the public sphere. In the midst of this renewed scrutiny, a new document has surfaced, one that may hold the key to understanding the military's motivations in the days following the incident. This document, a briefing prepared for high-ranking officials, outlines the potential ramifications of the Roswell incident on public sentiment and national security. What insights does it offer, and how might it reshape our understanding of the events that transpired in July 1947? The newly surfaced document, a briefing prepared for high-ranking officials, reveals a calculated concern over the public's reaction to the Roswell incident. It outlines the potential ramifications of widespread belief in extraterrestrial visitation, emphasizing the need for a unified narrative to mitigate panic and maintain national security. The language is stark. Phrases like public hysteria and national security threat punctuate the text, indicating that the military's swift reversal from a flying disc to a weather balloon was not merely a miscommunication, but a strategic maneuver. This document matters because it illustrates the delicate balance the military sought to maintain between transparency and control over the narrative. The stakes were not just about a single incident in the New Mexico desert. They involved the broader implications for public trust in government institutions during the nascent years of the Cold War. The fear of an uncontrolled narrative surrounding UFOs could potentially undermine the military's authority and provoke widespread unrest, especially in a time when the specter of communism loomed large. In reconsidering the events of July 1947, the emergence of this briefing shifts the understanding of the military's motivations. It suggests that the initial announcement of a flying disc was not a mere blunder, but rather a reflection of the military's genuine concern about the implications of such claims. The rapid retraction indicates a deeper anxiety about what the public might infer from the incident, an inference that could lead to questions about the government's ability to protect its citizens from unknown threats. The enduring mystery of Roswell continues to captivate not only those who lived through the incident, but also new generations drawn into the enigma. The fascination with UFOs has evolved into a cultural phenomenon, with countless documentaries, books, and forums dedicated to unraveling the truth. Yet the core questions surrounding the event remain unanswered. What really crashed in the desert? Why did the military feel compelled to reshape the narrative almost immediately? As the decades have passed, the legacy of Roswell has shaped the discourse on government transparency and accountability. It serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of truth and belief, where the line between reality and speculation blurs. The incident has become a pivotal chapter in the history of UFO phenomena, influencing not only how future events are perceived, but also how the government responds to similar incidents. The uncertainty surrounding Roswell fuels ongoing investigations, with amateur sleuths and serious researchers alike combing through archives, interviewing witnesses, and piecing together fragmented accounts. Each new claim or piece of evidence adds another layer to the already intricate tapestry of the incident, ensuring that it remains a subject of intense scrutiny and debate. As the public continues to grapple with the implications of unidentified aerial phenomena, the Roswell incident serves as a reminder of the power of narrative. The military's initial announcement and subsequent retraction have become a symbol of the struggle between the desire for truth and the necessity of control. It raises a pressing question: how much of what we accept as reality is shaped by those in power, and what remains hidden in the shadows of secrecy? The enduring mystery of Roswell is not merely a relic of the past, it is a living story that resonates today. The quest for answers persists, and with each new revelation, the narrative grows more complex. As researchers delve deeper into the archives, another document has emerged, one that promises to shed light on the military's ongoing engagement with the phenomenon. What does it reveal about the lengths to which the government may go to manage the truth? The events surrounding the Roswell incident remain a complex tapestry of verified facts, disputed claims, and theories that continue to provoke debate. On July 8, 1947, the Army Air Forces announced the recovery of a flying disc, only to retract that statement hours later, asserting it was merely a weather balloon. This abrupt reversal has fueled speculation about the motivations behind it. Key witnesses, including rancher Mac Brazel and military personnel like Colonel William Blanchard, provided accounts that have been scrutinized and interpreted in countless ways. While we can confirm the existence of the initial press release and the subsequent retraction, the reasons for this shift remain elusive. What changed within those critical hours? Who was involved in the decision to alter the narrative? The answers to these questions have significant implications for trust in government institutions and the credibility of official accounts. As we reflect on the Roswell incident, we are left with a legacy of uncertainty that has shaped public perception of military transparency and accountability. The precedent set in 1947 reverberates through history, reminding us of the delicate relationship between information and belief. This investigation was brought to you by OPA Nutrition, offering premium wellness supplements designed to support your focus, clarity, and daily performance. Discover more at opanutrition.com. Where are you listening from? What case or topic should we explore next? If you found value in this investigation, please like and subscribe.